Hey everyone, it's Steven. Today I have the 2022 Ford Edge SEL. This is Ford's offering in the popular mid-size two-row SUV segment. So this competes with things like the Chevy Blazer, Jeep Grand Cherokee, and the Volkswagen Atlas Cross Sport. And this is really meant for those people who want more space than is offered in the compact SUVs, like, the Ford Escape, for example, but they also only need 2 rows of seats. So instead of having 3 rows like the Explorer or some other offerings in this midsize crossover segment, they want just 2 rows, and that gives you a lot more cargo space and more rear legroom. The 2022 Ford Edge starts at an MSRP of about $37,000 for the base SE trim. Like I said before, this one here is the SEL trim, which comes with an MSRP of about $39,000 for that trim. As tested, this one comes up to a whopping $45,000, which is kind of ridiculous for what you're getting in this vehicle, but I'll kind of go into detail about that a little later. You can have some appearance packages like the SEL Sport Appearance Package, which gives you these dark gray aluminum brushed 18-inch alloy wheels. They look okay, I guess. And you also get some things like the blacked out mirror caps. You also have a $1,300 convenience package, which also increases the price of this, and that's how you get that $45,000 price tag. One interesting thing about the 2022 model year is that the 2022 Ford Edges all come with all-wheel drive standard. So there's actually no option to get anything other than all-wheel drive, which I think a lot of people will like, but that does hike up the pricing of the entire lineup, every trim, by $2,000, meaning that that's how you get that $37,000 starting price tag, which means this is actually more expensive than the Ford Explorer, which is a very popular offering in this midsize SUV class because it has 3 rows and a bit more practicality, and I think definitely bolder looks. I'm not the biggest fan of the looks of this car, and I'll kind of go into that later as well, but even with this SEL Sport Appearance package that kind of blacks out the grille and the mirror caps, like I said before, just not the most attractive car, I think. Ford could really do a refresh on this car to make it look a little bit more modern. This car comes standard with a turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, makes 250 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque, gives you 0 to 60 times in about 6.8 seconds. Not bad, definitely feels a little quick on its feet, but pretty standard in the midsize SUV class. I think that's something you'll notice about this car is that overall it's just fairly standard. All the numbers are pretty much standard in the class, but I think there are just certain things about this car that make it not appealing compared to some other offerings now, like the newly redesigned Jeep Grand Cherokee, which continues to impress me. So with this car specifically, you have an 8-speed automatic transmission with standard all-wheel drive across the entire lineup. Like I mentioned before, all-wheel drive is the only thing you can get it in and now. And that gives you fuel economy numbers of about 21 city, 28 highway for a combined total of about 23 miles per gallon. So again, very average in its class. It kind of stacks up to the competition, but there are some other things about this car that I think make it fall a little bit behind. And before we jump into an overview of the exterior here, I wanted to mention the different trims available. So the SE is the base one, that's the one that starts about $37,000. Then you've got the SEL, that's the one here, $39,000. And then above that, you have the new ST line, which gives it a bit more sporty stuff. So different from the SEL Sport package, but it gives you some nice red accents and things like that, but the same engine. And then you've also got the titanium, which is the super luxurious one. And then you've got the ST. The Edge ST is a pretty awesome car, actually, and I think that's one that a lot of people want to go for if you want a V6 engine with over 300 horsepower. That one is actually pretty fun. But anyways, the SEL I think is the actual sweet spot for this because you do get some of those luxurious features, and you do have the convenience package, which gives you some things like wireless charging pad, a better sound system, things like that, for about $1,300. So I do think it's definitely worth stepping up to the SEL trim. The SE is pretty bare bones. SEL is really where you get those things like the leather wrapped steering wheel, leather seats, kind of makes it feel a bit more upscale. Alright, I'm going to switch things up a little bit from my normal reviews and start from the rear fascia. So I will say this is probably my favorite part of the Ford Edge. I think it definitely is the most attractive part of the exterior. I like the taillights, they look fine. I like the Edge, kind of italicized lettering. I think it looks nice. And, you've got the traditional SEL all-wheel drive badging there. This one does have a $400 option for that Class 2 trailer tow hitch, which is kind of cool. Otherwise, you can see that you have no actual visible exhaust tips or under the car, and that's kind of as expected because this car definitely does not have anything resembling a nice exhaust sound. But yeah, I think overall the rear looks attractive, and I think it looks more modern than definitely the front. So a little dirty, this car, but you do have a power liftgate, comes with the convenience package, that $1,300 package I mentioned before, and you've got this rear space here. So this is actually quite nice. You've got almost 40 cubic feet of cargo space behind the second row seats here. So again, this is in that class segment where you only have 2 rows, so you get more rear legroom and more cargo space than something like the Ford Explorer, right? You've got about 73 cubic feet of cargo space if you let down the second row seats, which do fold 60/40. So you can see this is very spacious, right? This huge thing, I'm trying to use this for scale right here, but this huge little bar here couldn't fit in a compact SUV, but it does fit in the trunk diagonally of this vehicle, which is pretty cool. You do have these nice buttons on the left-hand side here that allow you to easily place the second row seats down. And you also have some really interesting storage cubbies here, like this. You can kind of put some stuff in here, and then kind of going to the others. Oh, and actually right here, you actually have a cool hook right here if you want to get groceries or anything like that. And then moving to the other side, you've got some more storage, which is pretty nice. The same hook and another storage compartment. So overall, this is an impressive trunk. You can fit quite a bit of stuff in here, as you can kind of see from my mess here. All right, making our way to the side profile here. Again, you've got those 18-inch aluminum wheels. They're pretty cool. I wouldn't say they're my favorite design in the world, but they look a little more interesting than the common cars that you see out there, right? You've got some black plastic towards the bottom of the vehicle that helps give this a bit more of a sporty appearance, if anyone wants to call it that. And a quick thing you'll notice about the door handles here are that you can see that this car has keyless entry, which is pretty cool. So neat little convenience touch, again, part of that convenience package, part of the SEL trim actually. So the blacked out mirror caps do look pretty nice. You've also got some blacked out roof rails, again, part of the SEL Sport appearance package. And moving back to the front here, that blacked out grille is going to be a very quick indication that this has the SEL Sport appearance package. The normal one is a little bit of a chrome look, but this one you've got some blacked pillars. I think that's what they call them. They call them literally just black pillars or something like that. But overall, this is a fine looking front. You know, Ford has proven in recent years with the new Bronco Sport and Bronco, the Mustang Mach-E, you know, they can make some really beautiful eye-catching vehicles, and I think they've kind of just let the edge rust away because, the edge has lost its edge. But, because truly, there is nothing interesting about the front of this vehicle in my opinion. It just doesn't look that great. You do have some LED daytime running lights and turn signals as well. That is part of the SEL trim. The SE doesn't even get LEDs. So definitely the SEL is that sweet spot like I mentioned before. So I really hope that Ford redesigns the Edge at some point, but I've heard rumors that they're just going to discontinue this car because it's just not doing so great. And with things like the Grand Cherokee, Volkswagen Atlas Cross Sport doing really well, and the new Chevy Blazer. I mean, the Blazer looks a lot better than this car in my opinion. The interior quality I would say is about the same, but the Blazer definitely wins in terms of looks. All right, let's go into the interior of the vehicle and see how that stacks up with the competition. First thing I did want to mention is that this exterior color here is called Oxford White. It is a no-cost option. I mean, you know, it's a typical white SUV. And before we actually step into the vehicle, I did want to show you guys the key fob as well. So this one does have remote start. That is part of the convenience package. And otherwise a very typical key fob here, but you do have that proximity keyless entry, which is nice. Stepping in, you can see those blue screens. So the center stack right there is surrounded and flanked by these two 4.2-inch screens that are light blue when you first get in the vehicle. You saw that Ford thing in the middle screen there. That's probably the biggest thing that people will notice immediately is this big 12-inch tablet-style display. I think when you first get into the interior, you are surprised by this, and it looks pretty high-tech, honestly. Like, I think a lot of people would be impressed by this if they haven't seen modern cars these days. But, you know, it looks fine. I think that part looks impressive on first glance. And then kind of going throughout the rest of the interior, you've got these awesome Active X gosh, what do they call this? Navy Pure seats. That's the color, the blue, and you've got some contrast orange stitching. Super interesting design choice. And I will say I really appreciate how much Ford goes all out on the whole blue theme, right? You know, their logo is blue, everything about them is blue, and they really, really like adding those blue touches to the entire cabin. And I don't know, I think it's pretty neat. I like how the startup screens are that light blue. I like how the speedometer, dial is blue, and Ford does that pretty much throughout its entire lineup. I like how there's a little blue ambient lighting that kind of lights up on this gear selector here when you start the car, and this is surrounded by a little blue tint that you might be able to see there as well. So I like it. I think that's neat. I like how they really buy into that branding. So let's start by covering what probably most people are interested in, is this huge 12-inch tablet style display. So this one here uses Ford's new Sync 4A system, so it has intelligent voice assist and things like that, and is generally pretty responsive. I think there's some cool, neat little quirks in it, like seeing the Ford Edge in the top left corner light up and move a little bit when you want to go into the settings for the vehicle, and then when you click away from it, it kind of goes back to a stationary station. I think that's pretty cool. This does also come standard with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is pretty neat. And again, the wireless charging pad helps out a lot. So this car has the tech that you want. An SEL trim does have pretty much every single thing that you could ever ask for, except for probably a surround view monitor. So, again, that is the sweet spot in the trim lineup, in my opinion. You've got Ford's Copilot 360 system, so pretty much has everything you need. You do also get adaptive cruise control with stop and go if you step up to the Copilot 360 Plus. I think that's like $1,000 package or something. And this vehicle does have that as well, and it worked pretty nicely for me. It does have lane trace assist, which is pretty neat, so you can actually just set it and kind of forget it. You do have to leave your hands on the wheel though, of course, and make sure you're kind of tugging along, but it generally traced the lanes pretty well here in Austin. Otherwise, I think my main complaint with this is going to be that the display, the Apple CarPlay display, doesn't really take up that much space. I feel like they could have done this a little bit better, but I guess I definitely get how hard that would be for a 12-inch display. I find myself often just doing this so that you can see the entire map, actually. But yeah, this is kind of the issue with the vertical displays, right? With Volvo, they have the same issue, and even Tesla's, right? But yeah, otherwise, my biggest complaint here is going to be the lack of physical climate control buttons. I hate having to touch this, and I also hate that this little bar appears here and makes you, like, it blocks space, essentially. I have to wait for it to disappear before I can touch things, which is kind of annoying. I do like that you have automatic climate control and you can set the wind speed. I think that's always really neat. But yeah, otherwise, like, I want these to be physical buttons. And I mean, I will say this looks nice. Like, this area looks pretty standard and modern. I think this thing is the thing that disappointed me, right? Because I want the surround view, but yeah, the quality of this rear view backup camera is not good. I don't know how much you guys can tell right now, but it is not good. You do only have rear parking sensors, no front parking sensors, unfortunately, on this model. But yeah, you can click it again to make it go away, but otherwise, I'll kind of show you guys a few menus here and you can see how responsive it is. So the Sync 4A is definitely better than the previous systems that Ford was using, but I will say this isn't as fast as I would like it to be. Like, it's still a little laggy. I think one thing I really like is the games available here. So you have a few different games you want to play if you ever feel the need to in your Ford Edge. But yeah, I'll say it's a nice system. I mean, this is still, it's very modern. I think, again, people expect this from cars in 2022 now. So kind of going away from that and going to the digital, half digital gauge cluster. Again, these are two 4.2-inch screens on both sides of a speedometer. It looks nice. Again, I really like that blue dial. I think it looks really neat. I like the blue, I guess, fuel gauge there. And otherwise, like, I think it looks nice. I like that Ford does everything blue. So kind of configurable. You can see that you have two sets of controls on both sides of the steering wheel. Pretty intuitive. The left one controls the left and the right one controls the right side. So the right side is definitely not as configurable. You can only show a few different things here, but the menus are pretty fast to respond, and you can set up a bunch of different settings in the left-hand one. Now, taking a look at the steering wheel itself, it looks okay. I do think it's a little busy having all this, and you actually do have paddle shifters as well, which is an interesting option in a car like this. And the turn stalks and the windshield wiper stalks are pretty normal. So we'll kind of just talk about this, which is the adaptive cruise control settings here. Easy to use, lane trace, you can change the distance, all the standard stuff. And like I said, it did work pretty well. The right-hand side is where you control skip track, go back, and volume up and down, and your intelligent voice control. So, I mean, it's a nice steering wheel. It's pretty easy to use. I do think it's still weird to have these so close together. I don't know, I personally wasn't a fan of that setup. But I mean, it could be worse, I guess. I'll talk about the door panels really quickly before we run into the rear of this car. But again, these blue seats really are stunning. I definitely think probably my actual favorite part of this vehicle. They're very dark blue, so you can't even really tell at night, but during the daytime, they do look quite stunning. And that orange contrast stitching is a really neat look. But yeah, the door panels here, you have that blue leather insert, and it feels good and looks nice. It looks high quality. The rest of it is pretty much just hard plastic. You do have some leather on the armrest, which is nice, but aside from that, everything else is pretty much just going to be plastic. You have no name brand speakers in this one. You can get the Bang & Olufsen on the higher trims, but the speaker system actually sounds decent for, I guess, the fact that it's not actually a nice one. Otherwise, you've got some chrome finishes around the door handles, and then I do really like this brushed mesh aluminum look on the trim here, as well as in the center stack here. So that definitely is a neat look, and I'm interested that Ford kind of went to the same style that, you know, Jaguar and a lot of other brands are doing these days. It looks modern, so I think Ford tried with the interior, but I think there's just too many low quality materials that kind of prevent Ford from really getting to the level of something like the Jeep Grand Cherokee. Okay, so now let's take a look at the second row of seats here. So again, one of the big reasons you buy this car is to have more rear legroom. If you constantly are taking around many adults, you know, and maybe you need some more legroom, it would be a good vehicle for that. So you can see you've got the similar blue seats in the back, which I love, obviously. And otherwise, this is my normal seating position here, and you have so much legroom. It is impressive. You can really stretch out in this vehicle. You've got some pockets here as well. And overall, I mean, the rear would be a nice place to be. I honestly think the rear might be more comfortable than the front. But yeah, you've definitely got good legroom and headroom, as I'll show you right here. I don't think I would hesitate to spend a nice road trip in the rear. You don't have tri-zone climate control though, so unfortunately this is all you're going to get in the rear, but you do have some charging ports at the bottom and a actual outlet as well. So kind of nice, and not a bad view from back here. So how does the 2022 Ford Edge SEL drive? It's pretty nice. The ride is pretty compliant. Ride quality is pretty good. Wind noise is a little bit higher than I would want in a car, but again, this is not a luxury car, so I wouldn't expect it to be that isolated or that quiet. I honestly think the tires do a good job of reducing road noise, and this car feels like a solid vehicle to drive all around. Wouldn't mind it for long road trips. I'm going about 62 right now, and you know, it's not too loud in the vehicle. It'd be pretty easy to have a conversation with my rear seat passengers, things like that. And that's probably what a lot of people are going to want this car for, is to have bigger road trips, you know, be able to fit a whole family or some more adults in here, things like that. Again, I would recommend stepping up to that SEL trim. I really do think that's the sweet spot in terms of pricing and in terms of the amenities you get in here. And overall, I mean, it's a pleasant vehicle to drive. Acceleration is not bad, like I said, 0 to 60 in 6.8, so it feels pretty standard for the size of this vehicle. 280 pound-feet of torque, though, is nothing to scoff at, so it can get going. This car does actually have a sport mode, which is kind of interesting. It's actually this button in the middle of the gear selector, which makes it seem really like fancy and stuff, but sport mode definitely holds your revs higher and stuff. But I will mention one of the negatives with this car is a pretty jerky transmission. The shifts aren't as smooth as I'm used to with some of the more high-quality luxury cars, but you know, I do think that that is something to watch out for when you're test driving this car, is if you can't really get a hang of the transmission, then that might be a deal breaker for you. But when you put in sport mode, it gets even worse. So I really would not recommend going to sport mode very often. It doesn't really sound that nice either. I feel like it's a weird pumped in artificial engine sound again to make it feel a little sportier, and it just does not do the trick for me personally. For me, I think this vehicle is way past its prime, and you know, Ford doesn't really need to redesign it because I don't think they're putting too much R&D money into this vehicle. So, you know, I think the Explorer does better, the Expedition, you know, the Escape, they all have their little segments, and the Ford Edge just has never been that competitive. And now with the newly redesigned Grand Cherokee kind of blowing it out of the water, I wouldn't expect Ford to really do much with this before they, you know, electrify essentially. So Ford really could do a lot. I really think if they made the exterior more striking and enhanced some of the interior materials, there's just a lot of plastic and a lot of places that look like an afterthought, right? They look like not too much thought was put into it essentially, and like it doesn't bode well essentially for you know, someone who's spending about $40,000 on this car, right? So I think overall for the price, this car just really isn't worth it right now. And you know, if you are a big Ford fanboy and you really want to get a Ford, then I do think this is potentially an option if you want to have a car for, you know, a big family essentially, right? Like the three seats in the back are all usable, so you could definitely haul an entire family of 5 around pretty comfortably. And you know, I personally think there are better options out there, but you know, this is not a terrible option, I would say. But as I'm sure you've gathered, this is pretty much a no for me. I personally would never want to spend $40,000 on a vehicle like this, especially this one right here is $45,000. I do think some positives are the fact that it has almost all the tech you could ever want, right? That Copilot 360 suite of safety features, blind spot monitors, rear cross traffic alert, rear parking sensors, you know, lane keep assist, lane trace assist with adaptive cruise control, all is quite impressive. I think Ford has done a good job offering that at a standard level for the entire lineup. The 12-inch display is very impressive, and the fact that that's standard even on the base SE trim is impressive, right? Like that is something that, you know, kind of you can show off. At the end of the day, I really don't think the screen is as good as you want. Like, it kind of reminds me of Subaru's new screen, right? Where it's like, it's really big, it's a tablet style, it looks impressive, but overall the resolution doesn't feel like it's quite there, and the software and the processing power just doesn't seem like it's there yet. So again, a bit more of an afterthought. It doesn't compete with things like Mazda, like a lot of the more you know, cars that feel a bit more premium, but they're still considered economy cars. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk through in this review today. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to check out my other content, you can click for my other videos up here and subscribe down here. Leave me a like, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about this vehicle. Again, I do think it's going to be discontinued pretty soon, so if you do want to snag one of these, now is probably the time. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!